Mom, you're not on the list. My son barred me from entering my granddaughter's wedding in front of 200 people. I am Eleanor Vance, a 72-year-old widow. But they forgot one tiny detail. I was the one who paid for the entire party. I had spent the whole morning getting ready. You know how it is, right? A granddaughter's wedding. The first grandchild is an event you wait a lifetime for. My Claire. It seemed like yesterday I was changing her diapers, teaching her how to make the banana pudding that my late husband Arthur loved so much. And now she was getting married. A grandmother's heart doesn't have enough room for so much pride. I chose my best dress, a rose-colored pure silk number I was saving for a special occasion. I put on the pearl necklace that belonged to my mother and used that French perfume I only wear on holidays. I felt beautiful, dignified. I wanted Claire to look at me and see a happy grandmother, a matriarch. Little did I know that the role my son Richard had reserved for me was that of a nuisance. For the last 6 months, my life revolved around this wedding. Richard and my daughter-in-law Susan came to my house, sat on my velvet sofa, drank my coffee, and with the sweetest eyes in the world, explained their difficulties. "Mom, you know how the economy is," Richard began. "Things are tight, and we would love so much to give Claire the wedding of her dreams." I, foolish as I was, opened my heart and my checkbook. "How much does my granddaughter's dream wedding cost?" I asked. And they presented me with estimates for an estate in the Hudson Valley that looked like a palace, a caterer serving lobster, and a dress that cost as much as a compact car. And I paid. I paid for everything, every penny, over $100,000. All transferred from my account, the account Arthur left me, so I could have a peaceful old age and help the family. I signed the contracts I negotiated with the vendors. My name was on every detail of that party. I took an Uber Black and went humming quietly to myself. The driver, a nice young man, even complimented me. "You look very elegant, ma'am. Heading to a fancy party, huh?" I smiled and said, "I'm going to the happiest day of my granddaughter's life." When I arrived at the Golden Oaks estate, the place was dazzling. Arches of white flowers, fairy lights hanging from the trees, soft classical music playing. The guests were arriving, everyone well-dressed, laughing. There were 200 people. 200 people I knew. Family, friends, neighbors, distant relatives. Everyone waved at me from afar. "Good evening, Mrs. Vance. What a beautiful party." I walked proudly to the main entrance. Richard and Susan were there greeting the guests. My son was wearing a tuxedo that looked stitched to his body. My daughter-in-law, Susan, an emerald green dress that shined brighter than a Christmas tree. "Richard, my son, what a blessing," I said, leaning in to give him a kiss. He didn't move. Richard looked at me, looked to the sides, and his face hardened. He didn't look like the boy I nursed. He looked like a stranger, a bank manager denying me a loan. Susan beside him looked away and pretended to fix a flower in the centerpiece. "Mom," he said, and his voice was cold as ice. "What are you doing here?" I laughed, thinking it was a joke. "What do you mean, what am I doing? I came to see my granddaughter get married. I came to the party." It was then that he grabbed the clipboard the hostess was holding. He ran his finger down the list once, twice, with a seriousness that put a knot in my stomach. The music seemed to lower in volume. The 200 people in the line behind me went silent. I felt every pair of eyes on me. "Mom, you're not on the list," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. My smile froze. "What do you mean I'm not on the list, Richard? What kind of joke is this?" "It's no joke," he said with impatience. "Your name isn't here. It must have been a mistake on the invitation." A mistake on the invitation. The invitation I had paid for. The list that I myself had helped Susan review so we wouldn't forget any aunt from Ohio. The humiliation rose up my face like a fever. I felt my cheeks burning. I looked at Susan, who was now looking at me with a victorious little smirk almost imperceptible. I looked at the 200 people watching me. I saw Mrs. Higgins, my neighbor of 30 years, with her hand over her mouth, horrified. I saw my nephew Charles pretending to look at his phone. Nobody said anything. Nobody defended me. I was expelled in front of everyone, treated like an intruder, a vagrant, a public nuisance. I took a deep breath. A lifetime of dignity wasn't going to be undone by an ungrateful brat. I wasn't going to give them the pleasure of seeing me cry or scream. I adjusted my pearl necklace. I looked directly into Richard's cold eyes. "All right, son." My voice came out steady to my own surprise. It didn't shake. "If it was a mistake, I apologize for the inconvenience." I turned around and took the longest walk of my life. I passed by the line of 200 people who parted to let me through as if I were a contagious disease. Nobody touched me. Nobody offered an arm. I walked with my head held high, passing under the flower arches I paid for, listening to the classical music I chose, leaving the party I organized. The Uber driver was still there, waiting for another ride. "Wow, Mrs. Vance, did you forget something?" "Yes," I said, getting into the car. "I forgot who my son really was." The ride back to my house in Westchester was silent. The rage from the public disrespect was such that I couldn't even cry. The moral indignation was suffocating me. They had used me. They took my money, absorbed my goodwill, and when it came time to celebrate, they discarded me like orange peels. They wanted my money, but they didn't want me. They were ashamed of the old woman. I arrived home, and the silence of my house was deafening. The pink dress felt like a ridiculous costume. I took it off and threw it on the floor. I stood there in my living room, looking at the portrait of my late Arthur on the wall. Arthur would never have allowed this. Arthur would have looked at Richard and said, "You are no son of mine." But Arthur was gone. It was just me. I could have sat down and cried. I could have called my sisters to complain. I could have taken a sleeping pill and pretended that night never happened. But the Eleanor who returned from that party wasn't the same Eleanor who went. The humiliation had burned away the foolish granny and awakened Eleanor Vance, the woman who managed her husband's business for 10 years after he got sick. The woman who balanced the books, negotiated with unions, and knew the value of every dime. I didn't cry. I went to my home office, opened the filing cabinet, and pulled out the thick, cream-colored folder, labeled Claire's Wedding. Inside was everything. The contract signed with the Golden Oaks in my name, the catering receipts in my name, the invoices for the decor in my name, the wire transfer confirmations leaving my account to the accounts of each of those vendors. I picked up the phone. It was almost 8 in the evening, but I knew he would answer. "Mr. Matthews, good evening. It's Eleanor Vance." There was a pause on the other end. "Eleanor, what a surprise. Congratulations. Isn't today your granddaughter's big day?" My lips curved into a smile that held no joy. It was an iron smile. "Mr. Matthews, you've been my attorney for 30 years because you are the best, and I need you to be the best tomorrow morning. Do you have 5 minutes?" "For you, Eleanor, I have all night. What happened?" "What happened is that I was invited to leave the party I paid for myself. What happened is that my son and daughter-in-law made a small calculation error. They thought they could keep my money and treat me like trash. And I need you to help me correct that error." I sat in my leather armchair, the folder of documents open in front of me. The pain in my chest was still there. The second-hand embarrassment still burned. But now, there was something else. There was a plan. Richard thought he had closed the door to the party on me. Little did he know I had just closed the door on his easy life. The next day, he wasn't going to receive an apology letter. He was going to get served. I didn't sleep that night. How can you sleep after being kicked out of your own granddaughter's party like a stray dog? I sat in the living room armchair, the pink dress still lying on the floor, a monument to my humiliation. Every hour on the hour, the grandfather clock Arthur gave me seemed to scream in my face. "Mistake, mistake!" The sun rose, but the house remained dark to me. I didn't make coffee. The smell of fresh coffee, which had always been my comfort, seemed sour today. The pain in my chest was no longer that sharp stab from the night before. It was a dull, heavy ache, the pain of grief. I was mourning the son I thought I had. At 9 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. It was Mr. Matthews. Not only has he been my lawyer for 30 years, he was Richard's godfather. He watched my son grow up. "Eleanor," he said as soon as I opened the door. He didn't say good morning. He looked at my face, at my sunken eyes, and his expression, which was one of concern, transformed into righteous anger. "My God, sit down. Eleanor, sit down." He guided me to the sofa, as if I were made of glass. "I'm not sitting, Robert. I'm fine. The folder is on the table." He took off his jacket, a man of 75, but still with the straight back of someone who has spent a life fighting in courtrooms. He sat at the dining table, opened the cream folder, and began to read. I stood looking out the window. It was a beautiful day. The neighbors' kids were playing in the yard. A normal Sunday. A Sunday where I should be having brunch at a luxury hotel, laughing with my granddaughter about the party, maybe complaining about sore feet from dancing so much. "Eleanor," Mr. Matthews called, and his voice pulled me from my trance. "I'm looking at the catering contracts, the decor receipts, the rental of the estate. It's all in your name." "I paid for everything, Robert, even the wedding favors," I said without turning around. "And the payments? All from your personal account, direct wire transfers." He tapped the statements I had stapled. "They have no way to argue it was a gift in the legal sense. You were the contractor for all services. Technically, the party was yours. You were the host." I laughed, a dry sound that scratched my throat. The host. And they locked me out. What irony. "This is more than irony, Eleanor. This is low." He stopped talking. He knew Richard. He knew what he was thinking. He was thinking of the boy he watched take his first communion. "What do you want to do?" "We can sue for damages, emotional distress, public humiliation with 200 witnesses." I turned and looked at him. "Robert, what do you think I want? An apology, a settlement check they'll pay using my own money." It was in that moment I realized, not the humiliation, but the power. They didn't see me as a mother or grandmother. They saw me as a source, a well of money that never ran dry. And do you know what you do with a well when it's not needed? You cover it. Or in their case, you stop it from entering the party so it doesn't ruin the photo. I remembered years of being underestimated, years of being treated like the little old lady. "Oh, Mom, you don't understand real estate investment." Richard told me when I suggested he not buy that luxury car and invest in a rental condo instead. "Mrs. Vance, this iPhone is too complicated for you." Susan told me with that pitying little voice when I asked about the banking app. Little did they know that after Arthur passed, I managed his logistics company for 10 years. I negotiated contracts with Teamsters, dealt with unions, made cash flow spreadsheets that would make Susan weep. I sold the company 5 years ago for a fortune. A fortune Richard and Susan thought was just a good retirement fund. They had no idea of the magnitude. They thought my $100,000 for the party was a huge sacrifice. To me, it was pocket change I gave with love, and which they spit back in my face. I saw myself from the outside, the nice widow Mrs. Vance, the one who bakes brownies, who babysits so the couple can enjoy themselves, who writes the check for the granddaughter to study abroad, who pays the daughter-in-law's credit card bill just this once. I wasn't a person to them. I was a function. "Robert," I said, and my voice was different. That tremor of tears was gone. It was the voice of Eleanor Vance, CEO of Vance Logistics, which Arthur named even though Richard was just a boy back then. "Put away that wedding folder. It's proof of bad faith, but it's not the weapon." Mr. Matthews looked at me confused. "Eleanor, I don't understand." "Where are Richard and Susan now?" I asked. "Well, today is Sunday. The party was yesterday. They must be on their way to their honeymoon." "Paris. I think I heard Claire mention," he said. "Great. They'll have 15 days of happiness. They'll need to cherish the memory." I went to my office, not the social desk where I kept the household bills. I went to Arthur's office, which I kept locked. I opened the safe, took out another folder, a blue one. I went back to the living room and placed the blue folder in front of Mr. Matthews. "What is this?" he asked. "This," I said, "is power rediscovered." He opened it. There were 2 deeds. The apartment where Richard and Susan live in Tribeca, 3-bedroom suite terrace. Mr. Matthews' eyes went wide. "It's in your name, Eleanor." "Of course it is. I bought it as an investment." Richard came with a story that rent was expensive, that Susan wanted a better place to raise the kids. I told them they could stay there as a favor. A verbal agreement. No signed lease. They've been living there for 8 years rent-free. They've never paid a cent of the HOA fees. I pay them. They've never paid property taxes. I pay them. Mr. Matthews swallowed hard. And the other deed, the beach house in the Hamptons where they spend every long weekend, where Susan takes photos and posts them on Instagram saying, "Our paradise." "It's my paradise," I continued. "Robert, go to my garage. There's a gunmetal gray Mercedes. It's the car Richard uses. The company car," he tells his friends. "The company was mine. I sold the company, but I kept the cars. The title is in my name. The insurance is in my name. The registration, I pay it." Mr. Matthews closed the blue folder. He leaned back in the chair. He no longer looked like a lawyer. He looked like a general staring at a war map. "Eleanor Vance, what do you want me to do?" "They closed the entrance of the party to me. They took me off the list. Well, I'm going to do the same." I started pacing the living room. The headache was gone. The hunger was gone. The sadness had turned into jet fuel. First, the Tribeca apartment. I want a notice to quit, an eviction notice. The moment they set foot in JFK coming back from Paris, I want a process server waiting for them at the terminal. No better yet. I want the notice taped to the door of the apartment, which is no longer theirs. 30 days to get out. 30 days, Eleanor. That's what the law requires, isn't it? If it were up to my heart, I'd give them 30 minutes, but I follow the law. 30 days. Second the beach house. Change the locks tomorrow. Hire a security company. If they try to enter, it's trespassing. Third the car. The car is simpler. You're going to send a certified letter demanding the immediate return of the asset. If he doesn't return it in 48 hours, we file a police report for grand theft auto. Fourth, I stopped. I went to my purse, which was thrown on the sofa. I took out my phone. I opened the banking app, the one Susan thought I didn't know how to use. I went to scheduled transfers. There it was. Monthly allowance, Richard Vance, $5,000 every first of the month. I looked at the cancel button. "Robert," I said, turning the phone toward him. "Look at this." He looked and whistled. $5,000 a month. It's help for expenses, as they like to say. Susan doesn't work, you know. She says she's an influencer. She influences her friends to buy things with my money. And Richard's salary at that little ad agency he opened barely pays for the suit he used to humiliate me. I pressed the cancel button. A red light flashed. Scheduled transfer canceled. "Done," I said. Fourth. Mr. Matthews stayed silent for a long minute. He looked at me in a way he hadn't looked at me in years. Not with pity like one looks at a widow. He looked at me with respect, the same respect he had for Arthur. "They are going to hate you, Eleanor," he said quietly. "They already hate me, Robert. They just hid it well because they needed my money. They don't hate me for being mean. They hate me for being old. They hate me because I remind them they are nothing without me. The hate is already there. The only thing that will change is that now they will hate me from a distance. And poor. And Claire, your granddaughter. That hurt. The knife twisted. Claire, my girl. She was an accomplice. She knew the grandmother who paid for her dress wasn't on the list. Or maybe she was just a useful idiot manipulated by her mother and father. Claire made her choice," I said, and my voice cracked for the first time. When she saw her father forbid her grandmother entry and didn't say a word, she chose. She chose the luxury. She chose the party. She chose her side. Now she will have to live with the side she chose without the benefits of Grandma. I took a deep breath. We spend our whole lives giving roots to our children, Robert. We bury ourselves in the earth so they can grow strong. But when the tree grows and only gives rotten fruit, you have to stop watering it. And sometimes, Robert, sometimes you have to cut down the whole tree. Mr. Matthews stood up. He put the blue folder in his briefcase. He grabbed his jacket. "I'll prepare the notices today, Eleanor. The process server will be at the apartment when they return. The locksmith will be in the Hamptons tomorrow." He paused at the door. Are you going to be okay?" I looked at Arthur's portrait on the wall. He was smiling as always. "I'm already okay, Robert. Last night I felt like a mistake. Today, I feel like a new beginning." He nodded and left. I closed the door. The house was silent. But it was no longer the silence of defeat. It was the silence before battle, the silence of strategy. My son and daughter-in-law were flying over the Atlantic drinking champagne, laughing at the senile old woman they had tricked. They were going to the City of Lights. Little did they know that when they returned, all the lights of the easy life they knew would be turned off. The 15 days that followed were the strangest of my life. Richard and Susan were in Paris drinking bubbly and eating expensive cheese, and I was in New York dismantling the life I had built for them. The execution was silent, exactly as I planned. The foolish old lady was replaced by Eleanor Vance, the strategist. I felt like a war general moving my pawns on a board only I could see. The first day, Monday, Mr. Matthews called me. "Eleanor the locksmith is in the Hamptons. The locks on the beach house will be changed by noon." "Perfect," I replied. "Send me the invoice and the new keys, please. Use a trusted courier." While he handled the beach, I handled my house. I finally picked up that pink dress still on my bedroom floor and didn't wash it. I ripped it. I ripped it with my own hands with a cold rage I didn't know I had. I cut it into pieces and threw it in the trash. Then I did a cleaning. I went to the guest room, which they called our room, when they slept here. I stripped the expensive sheets Susan demanded I buy, the embroidered towels. I stripped it all, put it in trash bags, too. The guest room was now just a guest room. I passed through the living room and stopped in front of the main picture frame. It was a photo from last Christmas. Me, Richard, Susan, and Claire all smiling. Susan's smile was the same one she gave me before Richard barred my entry. I took the frame, removed the photo, and shoved it in a dark drawer. In its place, I put a photo of me and Arthur the day we opened the trucking company. Both young, stained with grease, but with the smile of people who had conquered the world. "There, Arthur," I whispered. "Now the house is in order." A week passed. The first of the month arrived. That was the day I waited for most, the day of the $5,000 allowance. I woke up early, made my coffee, sat in my armchair, and stared at the clock. I knew that in Paris, with the time difference, it was already mid-afternoon. I closed my eyes and imagined the scene. Susan, with her bags from the Champs-Élysées, entering another handbag store with a complicated name. She hands over the debit card. The salesperson with that haughty nose swipes the card once, twice. "I'm sorry, madame. Declined." I imagined Susan turning red. "What do you mean, declined?" "Try again. My husband is rich." I imagined Richard at the corner cafe trying to pay for croissants and his card also being declined. I imagined the silent panic. The first crack in their perfect life. They didn't call me. But at the end of the day, a text message arrived on my old cell phone, the one I kept on precisely for this. "Mom, are you okay? The money hasn't arrived. Did something happen to you?" It was from Richard. Note the worry. It wasn't, "Mom, how are you feeling after the party?" It was, "The money hasn't arrived." I looked at the message. My fingers itched to reply, to type everything I had stuck in my throat. But Eleanor the strategist knew that silence in that moment was more powerful than any word. Silence was my weapon. They were in Paris without the extra money, looking at their bank statement at zero and understanding nothing. Confusion was the first stage of my plan. I didn't reply. I simply deleted the message. In the following days, Mr. Matthews continued working. "Eleanor, the eviction notice for the apartment is filed. The process server is scheduled for the day of their arrival. Everything as you asked. Eleanor, the certified letter demanding the return of the vehicle has been sent to the Tribeca address. When they arrive, the doorman will hand it to them." I felt light. I had rediscovered a purpose. I spent years being grandma, and there is nothing wrong with being a grandma. But I had forgotten to be Eleanor. I started leaving the house. I went to the salon, cut my hair short in a modern style Susan always said was for young people. I dyed it a luminous chestnut, removing the gray that aged me. I went shopping, but not to buy gifts for my granddaughter or house clothes. I bought a new computer, the most modern one. I hired a young man to come to the house and give me private lessons. "I want to learn how to handle everything," I told him. "I want to know about spreadsheets, investments, apps." Susan thought I didn't know how to use a cell phone. Little did she know that this week I had used the banking app to transfer 90% of my liquid assets into an investment fund with a security lock not even the Pope could touch. The rest, the day-to-day money, I put in a new account at a digital bank where only I had the password. The old account Richard knew about I left with a balance of $1,000 just in case he tried something. It was armored. On Saturday, the day before they returned, I did something I hadn't done in years. I drove. I took the keys to my car, an older model, but one I loved that was sitting in the garage, and drove to the Hamptons. I arrived at the beach house and used the new keys Mr. Matthews' courier delivered. The house was silent. It smelled of sea and closed furniture, but the sweet, cloying perfume of Susan was gone. Richard's imported beer bottles weren't in the fridge. It was my house. I sat on the deck facing the ocean I paid for, and I cried. But it wasn't a cry of sadness. It was a cry of relief. I cried for the Eleanor who let herself be used. I cried for Arthur for having allowed his son to become this monster of ingratitude. "But it's over, old man," I said, looking at the sea. "The nonsense is over. From now on, the one who bosses my life and my money is me." I slept at the beach house and returned on Sunday, the day of their arrival. I knew the flight from Paris landed at JFK at 5 p.m. I calculated the time. Customs baggage claim, New York traffic. They would arrive in Tribeca around 8 p.m. I prepared myself. I took a bath with salts, put on silk pajamas, made chamomile tea, sat in my favorite armchair, the one facing the phone. I wasn't nervous. I was at peace. At 8:15 p.m. the phone rang. Richard's number. I let it ring 3 times, took a deep breath, and answered. "Hello," I said with the calmest voice in the world. What came from the other side wasn't a voice. It was a scream, a roar of a wounded animal. "Mom, what does this mean? Have you gone crazy? Are you kicking us out?" I pulled the phone away from my ear. I could hear Susan screaming in the background. "She's gone crazy. She wants to kill us with stress. Call the police, Richard." I waited for the screams to subside. "Richard, please keep your voice down. I'm not deaf. What are you talking about?" I asked with the greatest innocence I could fake. "What am I talking about?" he bellowed. "I have a paper taped to my door, a process server, notice to quit, 30 days. What kind of joke is this, Mom?" "Ah, that," I said, as if remembering an unimportant detail. "It's not a joke, my son. It's a legal notice. It's quite serious." "Serious? You are throwing me on the street. Your son, your only son." "I'm not throwing you on the street, Richard. I'm asking for my apartment back. What you do with yourself is your problem. Where you are going to live now is your problem." There was silence on the other end, a silence of shock. He didn't expect this firmness. He expected me to cry, apologize, say it was a mistake by the lawyer. "It's about the wedding, isn't it?" His voice changed, lost the rage, and gained a tone of negotiation. The tone he used to ask me for money. "Mom, for the love of God," Susan got nervous. "She doesn't know how to organize lists. It was a mistake, a horrible mistake. We wanted to call you from Paris to apologize, but—" "Mistake," I cut him off. "Mistake. Richard was the invitation I received. Or rather, the invitation I paid for and that you used to humiliate me in front of 200 people. But, Mom, it was a misunderstanding. Not on the list was the list of the bridal party. The hostess got confused." "No," I said, and my voice was pure ice. "You looked me in the eye and said, 'Mom, you're not on the list. It was a mistake on the invitation. You forbade me entry, Richard. You and your wife. You treated me like a nuisance, and finally I understood." "Understood what, Mom?" "That you're going to destroy your family." "No, Richard. I understood that I no longer have a family. What I have is a son and a daughter-in-law who are parasites who suck my money, live in my apartment, use my beach house, and on top of that have the nerve to ban me from the party I paid for." "That's not true. We love you," Susan shouted, grabbing the phone. "You love my money, Susan, but the money ran out," I said. "What do you mean it ran out?" Richard grabbed the phone again now in total panic. "The money, the allowance on the first— What happened? What happened is that I'm old Richard, and old people spend a lot on medicine. You know the money ran out, the well dried up, those $5,000 a month are over. The Mercedes that the doorman handed you the return letter for, I need you to return it. I'm going to sell it. I need money to live." Sell it. But it's my car. I use it for work. It's my car, Richard, and you're going to have to work hard now because besides all that, you have 30 days to leave my apartment. You can't do this. I'm your son. I'm going to sue you. I'm going to say you're senile. I'm going to incapacitate you. I'm going to ask for a conservatorship. I laughed, a short, bitter laugh. Try it, Richard. Try to sue me. But you'll need a good lawyer, and lawyers cost money, and your money, as I told you, is gone. Mr. Matthews is very busy. He works full-time for the senile old woman here now. I waited for him to breathe. Richard, I said, ending the conversation, you barred me from entering by mistake. I am barring you, but by choice. You have 30 days. The clock started ticking the moment you read the notice. Good night, my son, and welcome back from your honeymoon. I hung up the phone. The silence in my living room was the most beautiful in the world. I hung up, and for the first time in many years, my house, which before seemed big and empty, seemed just the right size. It was the size of my peace. The silence that followed wasn't loneliness, it was control. Of course, the phone didn't take 10 seconds to ring again. And again and again. Richard and Susan must have been taking turns hitting the redial button as if their lives depended on it. And in reality, they did. I didn't answer. I went to the device that landline Susan always said was a museum piece and unplugged the cord from the wall. I sat on the sofa and for the first time since the night of the party took a deep breath, and the air didn't feel like it weighed a ton. The shame, the humiliation, all of that had left me and gone to the right place to those who deserved it. I slept. I slept 8 hours straight, a deep sleep without nightmares. The next day, I woke up with the sun on my face. The first thing I did was go to the kitchen and make my coffee, that drip coffee strong that Arthur used to say woke even the dead. While the water passed through the filter, I grabbed my new cell phone, the one Richard didn't even know existed. I opened the messaging app. 37 missed messages, all from Richard and Susan, sent during the night. I read the first one, Mom, for the love of God, answer. It was a mistake. Let's talk. I read the second, You are a monster destroying your son's life. Susan got sick. If something happens to her, it's your fault. I read the third, Eleanor. It's Richard. I've thought better of it. Let's make a deal. How much do you want to stop this madness? Half the apartment is mine by inheritance, right? I laughed out loud. Inheritance, I was very much alive. I deleted all the messages without reading the rest. I went to my computer class. While I was learning to make pivot tables in Excel and discovering I was very good at it, the first act of their desperation was happening in Tribeca. Richard, after a sleepless night, decided he was going to show who was boss. He woke up, put on the expensive suit paid for with my money, and went to the garage to take the Mercedes, my car, to go to his office, that little agency that barely paid the bills. He didn't count on Mr. Henderson, the doorman. Good morning, Mr. Vance. Good morning, Mrs. Vance. Glad you're back from your trip, said Mr. Henderson, polite as always, but without taking his hand off the gate control. Good morning, Henderson. Open up, I'm late, Richard said, pressing the key fob button. The car beeped, but the gate didn't open. Mr. Henderson, I told you to open it. I'm in a hurry. Mr. Henderson came out of the booth. He looked embarrassed. I apologize, Mr. Vance, but I have express orders from the owner, from Mrs. Eleanor Vance. Richard froze. Orders? What orders? The car. Mr. Henderson pointed. That car cannot leave the garage. It is on the list of assets to be returned. The insurance company has already been notified. And if you leave with it, Mrs. Vance told me to call 911 and file a report for theft. I'm very sorry, sir, but those are the rules. The owner of the car is her. I heard about this later from Mrs. Higgins, my neighbor who has a cousin working in that building. She said Susan started screaming at the doorman, calling him everything in the book. Richard, red as a tomato, had to take the baby seat out of the car, which I also paid for, and throw it on the garage floor before leaving on foot, huffing to find a taxi. That was the first concrete consequence, public humiliation, exactly like mine. Only theirs, instead of 200 people in a banquet hall, was in front of the doormen and nosy neighbors. The big businessman prevented from taking his own car. The second consequence arrived at lunchtime. Susan, desperate and hungry, tried to use a food delivery app. Card declined. Tried another. Declined. Tried Richard's. Declined. The $5,000 that dropped every first of the month wasn't just extra, it was their oxygen. And I had turned off the valve. They couldn't call me because I had unplugged the phone. They couldn't use the money because I had cut it off. They couldn't use the car because I had blocked it. So they did the only thing they could do. They came to find me. I was returning from my class carrying my new laptop in a nice tote bag. When I arrived at the door of my building, there they were. The two looked like castaways. Susan with messy hair, last night's makeup smeared. Richard with a wrinkled suit and a look of hate I had never seen on him. "Mom!" shouted Richard, coming toward me. I stopped. My doorman Batista was already going to intervene, but I signaled him to calm down. "Richard, Susan, what an unpleasant surprise," I said coldly. "Open the apartment door. We're going to talk inside," he said, trying to grab my arm. I pulled away. "I'm not going to talk to you, and you are not entering my house. You can't do this. I'm your son. I lived here." "You haven't lived here for 10 years, Richard. You live in an apartment that is mine, and from what I know, the 30-day clock is ticking." "Mrs. Vance," started Susan with a teary voice, the voice of falsehood. "For the love of God, you are being cruel. We made a mistake. We ask for forgiveness. It was the girl with the list she got confused." "Susan," I cut her off, "your acting is terrible. The girl with the list was you, and you watched me get rejected. You watched your husband humiliate me, and you put on that little smile, that victorious little smirk. I remember it very well. You thought you had won, didn't you? You thought you got the $100,000 wedding and got rid of the annoying old woman on the same day. A perfect deal." Susan went white, speechless. Richard moved to threats. "You're going to regret this. You're old. You're senile. I'm going to go to court. I'm going to ask for your incapacitation. I'm going to prove you're senile, spending the family money foolishly." I looked at him. My son, the baby I nursed, the man who now threatened to incapacitate me to keep stealing from me. I started to laugh. A strong laugh that made Batista, the doorman, jump. "Senile Richard, is that what you think?" I opened my bag and took out my new smartphone. I opened the bank app and showed him the screen. "Do you see this, Richard? It's the bank app. The same one Susan said was too complicated for me. Do you know what I did this morning? I bought stocks. Apple and JP Morgan Chase. I know how to do this. And you? What do you know how to do besides spend my money?" I continued, and the voice of Eleanor Vance, the trucking company owner, took control. "You want to incapacitate me? Try it. But you'll need a lawyer, and lawyers cost money. You'll need proof. And do you know what I did last week, Richard? I went to a forensic psychiatrist, one of the best in the country. I paid $1,000 for the consult, and I have an 8-page report certifying that I am perfectly lucid, more lucid than ever. Mr. Matthews has a copy. Any judge who sees your petition for incapacitation will laugh in your face and see that it is just an ungrateful son trying to rob his mother." Richard's face went from rage red to nausea green. He hadn't thought of that. "What did you think I was, a faucet you turn on, take the water, and then turn off? You forgot who built the water tank." It was at this point that the full revelation of my power, the power they never knew I had needed to be spoken. You are desperate for the 3-bedroom apartment in Tribeca. You cry for the Mercedes. You mourn the $5,000 a month. Do you think that is my money? I laughed again. That my dears is my pocket change. They looked at me without understanding. "Richard, do you think I sold Vance Logistics and retired? Do you think I'm the little old lady living off interest?" I got close to him and spoke in a low voice, but with such firmness, he took a step back. "I sold the operation of the company. I sold the trucks and the contracts. I never sold the real estate. Remember the industrial parks where your father worked? Those giant warehouses in the industrial zone where you used to go play with the forklifts when you were a kid?" Richard blinked, stunned. "Yes." "Well, there are 6 warehouses. 6. And they are leased. One to Amazon, another to FedEx, another to a pharmaceutical multinational. Do you know how much I receive in rent a month, Richard?" "No, you don't know, because if you knew, you would have treated me like a queen, even if just for interest." I paused so they could absorb it. Those $100,000 I gave for Claire's party that you used to humiliate me. Do you know what that represents of my monthly income? It represents, let me see, roughly what I pay in property taxes. It was pocket change, Richard. Pocket change I gave with love, and upon which you spit. Susan's jaw dropped literally. She stood with her mouth open, looking at me as if I were a ghost. Richard was pale. He seemed to have aged 10 years right there on the sidewalk. You thought I was Granny Mommy, but you forgot I am Eleanor Vance, Arthur's widow, the woman who ran a trucking company alone for 10 years and tripled its value. You underestimated me. That was your mistake. It wasn't the mistake on the invitation. I turned to Batista. Batista, please call security. These two people are harassing me. No, Mom, wait, shouted Richard desperately. The game had changed in a way he couldn't even process. Don't call me Mom. Your right to call me Mom ended at the door of that party. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have Italian class in a bit. Arrivederci. I entered the lobby. Batista closed the glass door in their faces. I didn't look back. I was going up in the elevator when my cell phone, the new one, rang. It was a number I didn't know, but I answered. Hello? Grandma? Grandma, it's Claire. Her voice was broken, teary. My heart, that grandmother's heart, I thought hardened, wavered for an instant. Claire, my granddaughter, what a surprise. How was the honeymoon in Paris? Was the party Grandma paid for good? Grandma, stop, she sobbed. What is happening? Dad and Susan called me. They are hysterical. They say you've gone crazy, that you are kicking them out of the house. I took a deep breath. This was the final battle. Claire, I haven't gone crazy. On the contrary, I have never been so sane. I am simply taking back what is mine. The apartment is mine. The car is mine. The money is mine. But Grandma, why is it because of the party? I swear I didn't even notice everything was so fast. I was so nervous. And there was the final stab. You didn't notice, Claire, I said, and my voice was a thread of ice. You didn't notice that your grandmother, the only grandmother you have, the woman who raised you while your mother got her nails done, the woman who paid for your wedding dress, wasn't there. Did you not look at the front row where I should have been and not see me? Did it not seem strange to you? Did they forbid you entry, Claire? No, but they did to me, in front of you, in front of 200 guests. Your father kicked me out like a dog, and you, my granddaughter, got married. You went to Paris, and in 15 days you didn't call me a single time to ask, Grandma, are you alive? You only call me now because your parents' money ran out. The silence on the other end was total. I only heard her stifled sobbing. Your parents made their decision, Claire, and you, with your silence, made yours. You chose the party, you chose the luxury. Now live with your choices. I love you, my granddaughter. But the foolish granny who paid for everything and accepted everything, she died. She died at the door of your party. I hung up the phone. The elevator doors opened on my floor. I entered my apartment. The new power dynamic was not only established, it was cemented. My new reality began with silence, but it wasn't the silence of an empty house. It was the silence of a house in peace. In the days that followed, I felt like someone waking up from a long fever. The world seemed clearer, the colors brighter, and I had control. The 30 days I gave Richard and Susan to leave the apartment flew by for me and must have dragged like an eternity for them. They didn't try to call me again. Apparently they hired a lawyer. Mr. Matthews called me laughing. Eleanor, I got a call from a colleague, a certain Mr. Miller. It seems Richard and Susan hired him to negotiate an amicable exit from the apartment, Matthews told me. And what did you tell him? I asked while watering my ferns. I told him that Eleanor Vance does not negotiate with people who treat her like garbage, and that the only negotiation was the handover of keys on the 30th day, or the sheriff would be called for an eviction. The kid was speechless. I don't think they told him the whole story. They never tell it, I replied. And the car, Robert, the car was returned. Richard had to pay for a tow truck to bring it to my office garage. Seems he didn't want the displeasure of bringing it to your door. Good for him. At least one smart decision. On the 30th day, promptly at 5 in the afternoon, a courier delivered a brown envelope to my front desk. Inside, the keys to the Tribeca apartment and the keys to the Hamptons house. No note, no apologies. Only surrender. I took those keys. They seemed heavy not because of the metal, but because of the weight of the lesson they cost. I found out from Mrs. Higgins, God bless her, she is more efficient than CNN, that Richard and Susan didn't go to a luxury hotel. They couldn't afford it anymore. They had to rent a tiny one-bedroom apartment in Queens with what little Richard got from a loan. Susan, the influencer, had to sell the designer bags I paid for to get the security deposit money. The lesson they learned wasn't one of love or regret. They are the type of people who don't learn that lesson. The lesson they learned was one of power. They learned the hard way that the money they loved so much didn't come from them, it came from me. And that the person who controls the money controls the game. The humiliation they put me through was public. Their fall was silent but definitive. The great businessman and the socialite were now riding the subway. But the biggest transformation wasn't theirs, it was mine. I sold the Tribeca apartment. I sold it in a week for an excellent price. The money didn't sit in the account. I used my new computer skills and started investing, but not just in stocks. I decided to invest in myself. I enrolled in the Italian class I always wanted. Buongiorno, come stai. I discovered I have a talent for languages, and that the teacher, a charming Italian gentleman named Lorenzo, loved my homemade brownies. I pulled an old project out of the drawer mine, and Arthur's a small shelter for abandoned dogs. With the money from the sale of the apartment, I bought a nice plot of land upstate and started construction. Mr. Matthews offered to handle all the paperwork for free, setting it up as a foundation. He said it was the most honorable thing he had done in years. My house, once the stage of my loneliness, became a hub of activity. My friends from the neighborhood, who before only saw me as the poor widow, now saw me differently. Mrs. Higgins stopped me in the elevator. "Eleanor," she said, holding my hand, "I need to tell you, what you did was for all of us. For all the crap we swallow in silence all our lives. You let out a scream for all of us." I hadn't realized. I didn't do it for all of us. I did it for me. But by doing it for me, I had inspired others. The positive impact wasn't just on my bank account. It was on my soul and on the souls of those around me. And Claire, my granddaughter. That was the part that still hurt. She didn't call me again, but about 2 months after her parents moved to the small apartment, my doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and my heart stopped. It was her, alone. She was thin, not carrying designer bags. She was wearing simple jeans and a t-shirt. She didn't look like the dazzling bride who went to Paris. She looked like a scared little girl. I opened the door. We stood looking at each other for a long time. She couldn't speak, just cried. "Grandma," she managed to say finally. "Come in, Claire." And she came in and sat on the sofa, the same sofa where her parents sat to ask me for the party money. "Grandma, I separated." I sat in the armchair. I wasn't surprised. "What happened, my child?" "The money, Grandma, the money ran out. Mark, my husband. He didn't marry me. He married Mrs. Eleanor Vance's granddaughter. When he found out my parents had lost everything, that you had cut them off, he changed. He became rude. He said I had tricked him, that he wasn't going to support poor relatives." She looked at me, eyes full of a shame I knew well. I discovered, Grandma, that the love I thought he felt for me was the same as the love my parents claimed to feel for you. It was a love that depended on your bank statement. I got up and went to the kitchen. I made chamomile tea with honey like I did when she was a child and had nightmares. I came back and gave her the cup. Her hands were shaking. "And your parents?" I asked. "They are unbearable," she vented. "Mom cries all day blaming Dad. Dad screams all day blaming you. They don't ask me how I am. They only ask me if I've tried talking to the old woman, yet if I've asked for forgiveness on their behalf." She looked at the tea. "They haven't learned anything, Grandma. They aren't sorry for humiliating you. They are angry because they got caught. They are angry because the well dried up." And there was the lesson she had learned harder than her parents. "Grandma, I know I was wrong," she said, looking me in the eyes. "I saw it. I was at the altar, and I saw when you arrived, and I saw Dad forbid your entry. I saw it, and I did nothing. I was afraid of ruining the party, afraid of what Susan would say. I was a coward, and I don't blame you for anything. You did what you had to do." I sat next to her on the sofa. She was my granddaughter, blood of my blood. "We spend our lives, Claire," I said, and the voice was the grandmother's, not the strategist's. "We spend our whole lives learning to swallow frogs to keep the peace. We think that being old means being nice, means being a doormat for others to step on. We forget that dignity has no age. It's not a garment we take off when we get old. It is our skin." I held her hand. "What I didn't do against your father. I did it for me. I chose my dignity, and that is a lesson that you unfortunately had to learn the hard way." "I have nowhere to go, Grandma," she whispered. "Mark kicked me out. I don't want to go back to my parents' house." I looked at her, the girl I taught to ride a bike. "There is a guest room down the hall," I said. "It has always been yours." Claire didn't become a princess. She started working. I didn't give her money. I gave her an old computer and internet connection. She who was good at drawing started doing freelance design work. She started paying her own bills. She started contributing to the electricity and gas. My transformation was complete, not because I had defeated my son, but because I had found myself. I had rediscovered Eleanor, the strong, lucid woman, capable of managing industrial warehouses and a dog shelter at the same time. The woman who now spoke Italian and understood the stock market. Richard and Susan never looked for me again. I heard from Mr. Matthews that they tried to file a lawsuit for abandonment of an elder or something their lawyer made up. The judge didn't even admit the case. They became a bitter footnote in my history. Today I look back at that night at the door of the estate with the pink dress, and I no longer feel the humiliation. I feel gratitude. It was necessary for them to forbid me entry to the party I paid for so that I would finally be invited to enter my own life. And this is a party that I will never let anyone kick me out of again.